questions and comments? The honourable member for York South Weston.
I guess I'll come back to the central point here, is that there is a witness protection program, whether started by the Liberals or fixed by the Conservatives or finally repaired by us, doesn't seem to matter, because it's underfunded. And I wonder how, even between 1996 and 2006, there wasn't enough money to do all of the witness protection that needed to be done, and that nowhere is that more evident than in the Air India disaster. So could the member actually comment on that?
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yeah, I do believe it would be important to substantiate a comment of that nature with some sort of empirical evidence, to show where was the demand, when did it not meet the requirements financially. What we do know for sure is that this legislation is going to be expanding the witness protection program. And if you're going to be expanding the program to include other things, you can anticipate that there is going to be a need to properly resource it. If you do not properly resource the expansion of it, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, you're limiting the ability of our 8 different agencies to ensure that it's effective. So, yes, we passed the legislation. One would like to think that the government will work with other jurisdictions to make sure that there is adequate resources on the field, on the ground, so that we can fully utilize this program, because if we fully utilize the program, Mr. Speaker, it will have a positive impact for all Canadians.
Conformément à l'article 38 du règlement, je dois faire connaître à la Chambre les questions qu'elle abordera à l'heure de l'adjournement ce soir. L'honorable député de Sherbrooke-Saint-Charles sur l'assurance emploi, l'honorable député de Saint-Laurent, Cartierville, les investissements étrangers, and the honourable member for Scarborough-Guildwood regarding national defence. Resuming debate, the honourable member for York South Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's my pleasure to speak on a piece of legislation that we actually support. We support the... I'm glad for the applause to the side. We support the notion. We support the direction. We are concerned about whether or not this will be resourced. That's going to be the $30 million or $50 million or $100 million question when it comes time for the Minister of Finance to bring forward a budget. Will he bring forward a budget that will actually put the money where their collective mouths are? It's all well and good to talk about witness protection. It's all well and good to talk about protecting victims. It's all well and good to talk about actually reducing crime in Canada, but unless you provide the money to actually do those things, it's not going to happen. And to this point, this government has not shown a willingness to put real money in real crime prevention, which I class witness protection as partly crime prevention, in real getting at the roots of the crime before they actually happen. But generally, the direction this bill goes, we support it. We're pleased to see them listening to our request to expand the witness protection program, and it will be expanded to include other items that include organized crime, includes other national security agencies can have access to this, including National Defense, including CSIS, etc., so that there can be the possibility of witness protection for other than what is currently covered. We count on the government to actually provide the funding, and we're going to be paying close attention to the budget come whatever day it happens, whether it's the end of March or the beginning of March, that budget will in fact put forward the funding required to actually do what this bill intends to do. The member for Winnipeg North suggested earlier that I have to come up with figures. Well, it doesn't have to go very much further than last year, when there were 108 requests, but only 30 were actually approved. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of money spent last year. There was something like $9 million. That's a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of money we spend on crime in this country. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of money we spend on jails in this country, on jets in this country. It's a drop in the bucket. There could be a tenfold increase in that spending, and it would do good It would do good for Canada. It would do good for Canadians. It would do good for actually solving crimes, actually finding the criminals, actually punishing them, if the Conservatives were to come up with that money. We're going to hope and pray that they do. In Toronto, where I'm from, there are several serious problems of gang violence that have gone on for a number of years. And while generally violent crime is down across the country, there are still gangs. The Toronto Police has a guns and gangs unit that and an organized crime unit that does reconnaissance, that actually hunts down criminals and tries to find them. But when I have spoken to Toronto police officers and to the superintendent of 12th Division, which is where my riding is, what they're looking for is the ability to find witnesses. That's the problem that they face, is the witnesses won't come forward. And why won't witnesses come forward? Because they're afraid. Because it's not, in this case, in some cases it's because they've taken some oath, but in most cases it's because they are terrified that there will be repercussions, that they cannot be protected, that they cannot be sheltered from harm. And this bill will, in the case of organized crime, at least provide the opportunity for police to offer protection to potential witnesses of violent crime in my city. I go back to the Danzig shootings of last year, where 24 people were shot, 2 of whom killed, in a simple neighborhood barbecue as a result of gang violence. And the police have had extreme difficulty in finding witnesses, in finding people who will come forward and actually testify. They know that there's lots of people who know what's going on. But the climate of fear, the climate of intimidation, and the climate of you can't be protected is the way people believe, that this bill may go some way to allowing the police forces to offer a sense of security to people that they can't offer now, particularly in the case of gang violence and gang-related crime, which we suspect, when 24 people are killed at once, or shot at once, 2 of whom are killed, that there is some measure of gang involvement in that crime. In addition, there is a significant-sized Somali population in my riding and in the riding immediately to my west of Etobicoke Centre. And that Somali population came here over the course of the last 15 years from a country that was riddled with unrest, that had no effective government. They came here as undocumented refugees, and they still can't get documentation, and so their status is still, in some cases, not able to be completely finalized as immigrants to Canada. And that community is terrified of some of what this Conservative government has done to them over the course of the past, since they've had a majority government. And I'm referring, of course, to the immigration changes that have come from the immigration minister. The mothers of those children are terrified that those children who've only ever known Canada as a result of falling into a bad crowd won't just go to jail. They'll be deported to a country they have no connection with whatsoever, to Somalia, where it is dangerous just to be, let alone grow up. And these boys, and most of them are boys, their mothers have pleaded with me and with the member from Etobicoke Centre to change that law, to fix that law, to fix that big hole that is causing their children to be in such terrible jeopardy. Yes, it's true, they have fallen into some bad habits. Bad habits is probably too small a word for it. They've done some seriously bad things. The mothers believe that part of the reason is that they've been abandoned by the system over the course of the last few years. There was put in place by this government, when it was a minority, a series of measures aimed at tackling youth violence before they got to gangs, with intervention programs and mediation programs and mentorship programs funded in part by the Minister of Public Safety to allow community agencies to get at these kids before they joined these gangs and went afoul of the law. And there have been tremendous successes in some of those agencies and some of those programs, but they are being cut back. They are being ended. The answer we get from the Conservative government is, well, that was a 3-year program. And the 3 years is up, and therefore we don't need to do this anymore. And the people running the program know that the program is successful, but they also know that if they end the program, that the next generation of kids is going to fall off the wagon. It's going to end up in crime, in propensity to gangs, and they are not going to succeed. So in addition, we've had, in my riding anyway, huge cutbacks to the immigrant settlement services that were being provided over the past 10 years, to the point where whole agencies have had to shut their doors. One agency was urged by the ministry, by CIC, to sign a 5-year lease. And 6 months later, after they signed the 5-year lease, they had all of their funding cut. And now they're sat holding a 5-year lease for something they can't afford to do. That's the kind of event that's going on in the community now. That's the kind of reality that this community faces. And what ends up happening is their kids end up in gangs. Their kids don't see hope. They don't see jobs. There's not a heck of a lot of jobs in my riding. There's not a heck of a lot of choice or of if as one of the youth said to me, I can either go work part-time at something like McDonald's or some other small retailer for $10.25 an hour and maybe work 20 hours a week and therefore maybe make $200. Or in 5 minutes I can go on a street corner and make $400 by selling drugs. What choice would you make? Said this kid to me. It wasn't because he was trying to give me a lesson in morality. What he was trying to tell me was a lesson in economics. They cannot afford to live. They cannot afford to eat, and they know they don't have access to the good jobs that remain in Canada. Those jobs are disappearing. The industrial heartland of Ontario has been under attack over the past few years, and millions of, well, hundreds of thousands of good-paying industrial jobs have disappeared and been replaced by service sector jobs at $10 and $12 an hour. Can't feed a family on $10 and $12 an hour. My point is not that I am condoning the selling of drugs. My point is that it becomes very easy and very economical and very the choices becomes easy for these kids when they're faced with these dire choices to choose a life of crime, and we're trying to prevent that. One of the ways that we hope to prevent that is by making it more difficult for them to succeed in this life of crime, by making it easier for witnesses to come forward. And when you make it easier for witnesses to come forward, we're back to the bill. Yes, exactly. We're making it easier for witnesses to come forward, but you have to provide the resources to make it easier for these witnesses to come forward. You have to provide the money. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime has published a good practices document for protection of witnesses in criminal proceedings involving organized crimes. 124 pages, well worth reading. That document talks about how you best should set up one of these programs. And one of the things they talk about is funding. And I'm just going to read you some of the documents. This goes back to the period 2005-2006 when the Liberals were in power. The Witness Protection Program of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police dealt with 53 new cases involving 66 persons. The cost of the program was $1.9 million. Italy, slightly more people in Italy than in Canada, but just to give you an idea, there were 4,000 witnesses and family members in the year 2004, and the budget was close to 84 million US, which currently is about 84 million Canadian. That's an enormous difference. That's 40 times more money for a witness protection program. in a country that clearly gets it, clearly understands that in order to defeat the omertas and in order to try and deal with organized crime in an organized way, you have to provide the funding to protect the witnesses who come forward. And until we see this government actually do that in its next budget, we're going to react with some skepticism to the intent behind this bill. Not that we don't doubt the veracity of the words. The words are there. And they're good. They're good words. That the bill should cover more people, and the bill should cover more events, and the bill should cover more crime, and the bill should, and the system should actually work better. But you can't work better if you're going to starve it. I have a constituent of mine who has run into the starving of the RCMP in his personal dealings. He has discovered that because the amount of money that is involved in the crime that has been committed against him is less than some magic number that the RCMP deems appropriate, they will not investigate. He is going to be left dangling in the breeze because the RCMP does not have the resources to investigate crimes. In his case, it's $70,000 that was essentially stolen, and the RCMP does not have the resources to be able to investigate that size of a crime. They have said, we have bigger fish to fry. That's the problem with the government's funding of the RCMP, is that it is not sufficient to do the job the government has given it to do. And we agree with the government giving it this job to do, but you have to give it the resources. You can't starve it and say, exist on the budget you've got. It doesn't work that way. And people like the constituent in my riding, who is now out $70,000 plus all kinds of legal bills over the years, is being told by the RCMP, so too bad, so sad, we're not going to do anything about it because we don't have the budget anymore to deal with smaller crimes. Well, smaller crimes is $70,000 to an individual in my riding. That's a couple of years' salary for many people in my riding. It's 4 years' salary for some. So you've got a situation in which the RCMP is under-resourced in a lot of ways and threatened with even smaller budgets by the Minister of Public Safety suggesting they're overpaid. But at the same time, you've got, with this bill, a bigger demand being placed on those resources. Nothing wrong with this bigger demand. We agree. We like it. But please put the money in the budget to be able to pay for an appropriate level of witness protection, a level of witness protection that will in fact ensure that Canadians can come forward and can actually testify safely in good conscience and protect other Canadians from crime by making sure that the bad guys, not those people on EI, but the real bad guys, are those people who are going to be put in jail. That's the whole point of this legislation, and I agree with it. The other part of this legislation, of the report from the United Nations, is a really good disclosure of what kinds of things they consider to be organized crime. Organized crime isn't just drug running. Organized crime, which is part of what's covered by this bill, includes the smuggling of persons into the country. And I would hope that this bill would in fact help police forces be able to stop the organized criminals from smuggling people into this country. You don't do it by making it difficult for the victims, by putting the victims in jail, which is what the conservative immigration bill has done. You do it by making sure you find ways to catch the criminals, to act, and calling this, if this bill actually does include in its mandate such crimes as human smuggling, I'm all for it. It also includes terrorism as one of the lists of crimes that is part of the United Nations definition of what organized crime is. It also includes corruption as one of the crimes that the United Nations considers part of organized crime. And as we've seen in Quebec in recent weeks, there's enough of that to go around for all of Canada, and it's spreading to other places. Does that mean, since corruption is part of organized crime, that this bill will in fact allow witnesses to come forward in the corruption investigation in Montreal and be protected. And be protected by this government, by the RCMP, from fear of retribution as a result of having come forward and disclosing the corruption that may be happening in that province and may be happening in other provinces as well. So there is lots to say about this. How much time do I have left, Mr. Speaker? 2 minutes. There is lots to say that is good about this bill, but I'll come back to our central point. Unless you put the money in it, and I'm glad somebody across the way is listening, unless you put the money, show me the money, unless you put the money in it, it's not going to have teeth. It's not going to have the ability to actually do the job. You can say all you want about wanting to protect witnesses. If you can't afford to do it, then witnesses aren't going to come forward. And we're going to be right back where we started from, and we're not going to be any further ahead. So I'm hoping, we're all hopeful on this side, that there may be some minor issues that we need to deal with in terms of the actual language of the bill in committee, but we do want to see it expeditiously passed. We do want this measure to actually reach the royal assent in a hurry. And so we don't have any intentions of stalling this, but we are paying close attention to what the finance minister will be saying about the funding of programs like this in his next budget, programs like this and other programs that are designed to make Canada a safer place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If there was a recurring theme in that intervention, it was spend, spend, spend. Now, I'm curious because the NDP gets up an awful lot, and they speak about spending, and they have a big checkbook over there. Indeed, I think they have found the magical, mystical money tree, Mr. Speaker, because there is money for everything. Now, I'm not aware of any budget suggestions that the NDP has sent to the Minister of Finance. I note that he's in his seat here as we speak. Perhaps the member could stand and give us a list of how much more money we have, of course, expanded the amount of money that we're spending on the RCMP in our time of government, and we've, I think, came forward with a number of very comprehensive measures aimed at states, streets, and communities. But how much more money should we give to the RCMP? I'd like to know what is the dollar figure that the NDP figures that the NDP or that the RCMP is being shortchanged, because I'm not aware that they're being shortchanged. I actually think that when we actually present a budget, when we ask them to seek efficiencies and to work as efficiently as they can, Mr. Speaker, given their responsibilities, that is a responsible way to operate government. I'd like to hear how much more money the member feels the RCMP should get.
The Honourable Member for York South Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that's a really good question. And what I'd like the member to do for me is, have they costed this bill? Do they know exactly what this bill is worth in terms of dollars, in terms of the numbers of people who will be able to be witness protected as a result of this bill coming forward? It is unfortunate. I don't see a costing attached to it, but certainly when we're in power, we will be costing everything and making sure that we don't overspend and making sure that we don't spend more than what Canadians expect to be spent by a reasonable and responsible government. What we want, though, is that there be enough money in the budget for measures such as this one, which are such good measures that they ought to be endorsed, and they ought to be endorsed with a financial amount from the Minister of Finance. If it means that less subsidy has to go to a big oil company, that's a decision that the Minister of Finance is going to have to make. But at some point, when you put forward legislation that expands the purview of the witness protection plan, you can't then say, and we're not going to spend another nickel on it. It just doesn't work.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the comments from the minister or from the member, and ask him in regards to at the end of the day, because of the program and the very nature where you have some provinces that have their own program in existence, that there is this obligation, I believe, a very strong obligation on the national government to provide leadership on the program. And part of that leadership means that you have to work with the different provincial entities to further develop the program. When we talk about expanding the witness program, that will mean that there will need to be additional resources. And I'm wondering if the member might want to provide comment as to, in order to achieve success in the program, that the federal government needs to work with the provinces and territories and to develop the program in order to be able to really hit its peak, and that includes the issue of properly resourced funding. I wonder if you might provide comment on that.
The honourable member for York South Weston.
Clearly, there will need to be a proper accountability in terms of funding, both at the provincial and at the federal level. And I hope that this isn't going to be another exercise in transferring the value, transferring the cost to another level of government. We'll announce a program, make somebody else pay for it. Seems to be a recurring theme on the other side. I hope that's not the case. I hope that we actually, when we have measures that are brought forth to increase public security on a national scope, that a national government will actually provide national resources for it. Where there are situations where we've created a system that a provincial entity has to follow, then the provincial entity will have to take into consideration those things. But this bill deals with crimes that have national implications, and they should be nationally resourced.
Where were we? Questions and comments. The honourable member from Jeanne-Lebert.
I would just like to expand on this discussion about the costing, because the parliamentary secretary asked us how much we would spend on this, and this is their bill. So I'm kind of wondering, we haven't seen any figures. We haven't sort of seen how much they intend to put into this, yet they're asking us to tell us how much we would spend. I think it's important that we understand how much a bill like this would cost. We think it's an important bill. We think it's something that needs to be done. So what do you feel in terms of their sharing information with us?
The honourable member for York South Weston.
That's an excellent question. It's been very difficult, as we know, and the parliamentary budget officer has had to go to court to try and get budgetary information out of the government. It's very difficult to get actual financial details of what they intend to spend and how they are spending money. And we would hope that when a government puts forward a bill that is clearly going to have a cost attached to it, that it clearly is expanding the scope of a federal program, that same government would actually, maybe in committee, I'm not sure where they're going to come up with it, but that government would actually come up with the actual figures of the costs of this bill and put those figures before Parliament so that we can all look at them.